The afternoon sun was hot, and the city streets were filled with the sounds of cars, people, and rushing footsteps. In the middle of this busy life, a young woman named Amina walked slowly, her body weak from hunger. She had not eaten a proper meal for 2 days. The last piece of bread she had saved was gone, and now her stomach cried for food. Her eyes looked tired, her hair was messy, and her clothes were simple and worn out. But even in her rough condition, she walked with a quiet dignity, holding her small bag close to her side. Amina had once lived a normal life. She had dreams, friends, and a family who supported her. But things had changed. Her father's small shop had closed after a powerful company bought the whole market street. The loss broke her father's health and left her family with nothing. After her father passed away, she had to leave school and search for work. At first, she managed small jobs, cleaning houses or washing dishes at food stalls. But now, after weeks without steady work, she had almost nothing left. She was too proud to beg on the street, and too honest to steal. All she wanted was a chance to work, even if only for a plate of food. As she walked past a tall iron gate, she stopped and looked up. Behind the gate stood a mansion that looked like a palace. The walls were painted white, the gardens inside were filled with flowers, and expensive cars were parked in the driveway. The smell of food floated faintly from the kitchen windows, and her stomach twisted painfully. She hesitated. Should she try? Would they even listen to her? She had been rejected many times before. But her hunger was stronger than her fear. She whispered to herself, maybe they will let me clean. Maybe they will give me just one plate. Her hands trembled as she pressed the doorbell. A guard walked toward her, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. Yes? What do you want here? His voice was stern, as if already ready to refuse. Amina lowered her head respectfully. Please, sir, she said softly. I don't want money. I just want to clean, or wash, or do any work you give me. In return, can I have a plate of food? The guard frowned. He had heard many strange requests before, but this one felt unusual. He looked at her thin frame and pale face, and for a moment his heart softened. But he was trained to be careful. Wait here, he told her. Minutes later, a maid came out. She was carrying cleaning tools and looked at Amina with curiosity. You want to work for food? She asked. Amina nodded quickly, her eyes shining with hope. The maid hesitated but finally handed her a broom. Clean the front steps. If you do it well, maybe the cook will give you something. Amina's heart jumped with gratitude. She grabbed the broom with both hands and started sweeping, as if it was the most important task in the world. Each stroke of the broom carried her prayer for a plate of rice or bread. She didn't care that dust covered her face or that sweat rolled down her neck. She just wanted to finish well. Inside the mansion, the large living room was filled with silence. The master of the house, a tall man in his 40s, had just returned from a long business meeting. His name was Mr. Cameron, a CEO known throughout the city as a millionaire who built his empire from nothing. People respected his power, his success, and his ability to change markets with a single decision. His employees feared him, competitors watched him, and the media followed him. But in private, Mr. Cameron was a man who rarely showed his emotions. He lived alone in the grand house, surrounded by luxury but also by emptiness. As he walked past the wide windows, something outside caught his eye. A young woman, thin and tired, was sweeping his steps with unusual care. She was not one of his regular workers. He paused and watched her. Something about her movements felt different. She did not sweep lazily, nor did she look like someone expecting charity. She worked with the seriousness of someone who valued even the smallest chance. His eyes narrowed. Who was she? And why did she look strangely familiar? Meanwhile, Amina kept sweeping, ignoring her aching arms. She thought of her father, of how he used to tell her, "Work is never shameful if it is honest." She repeated those words in her mind as her hunger gnawed at her stomach. She did not notice the man watching her from the window. To her, this was just another test of survival, another step to reach a single meal. After some time, the maid returned and nodded. "Good. Come inside." Amina followed her hesitantly, her heart pounding. She had never been inside such a large mansion. The marble floors shone like mirrors, chandeliers sparkled above her, and expensive paintings hung on the walls. She felt out of place, like a bird that had flown into a palace by mistake. Still, she kept her head low, grateful for even this moment. The maid guided her to the kitchen, where the smell of freshly cooked rice and meat filled the air. The cook looked at her with suspicion but finally placed a plate of food in front of her. Amina's eyes filled with tears. She whispered thank you before sitting down quietly. She ate slowly, carefully, as if each bite was a treasure. For her, this was more than just food, it was hope, dignity, and a reminder that kindness still existed. From the hallway, Mr. Cameron continued to watch. He saw the way she held herself, even in her hunger. She did not grab or rush. She did not beg for more. She simply ate with respect, grateful for what she was given. And suddenly, like a lightning strike, a memory flashed in his mind. He remembered a shop, years ago, where he had once gone with his parents as a young man. He remembered the smiling face of a shopkeeper's daughter who had offered him tea while his father discussed business. Her face, though older and worn now, carried the same eyes. Could this be the same girl? His heart skipped a beat. If it was true, then her family had been among those his company had driven out. He froze, his thoughts racing. Could it really be her? Amina, unaware of his gaze, finished her plate and wiped her hands carefully. She stood up and offered to wash the dishes she had used. For her, it was the right thing to do. But for Mr. Cameron, it was the start of something he could no longer ignore. He had power, wealth, and influence, but in that moment, all he could see was a young woman whose strength and dignity touched something deep inside him. The day that had started with hunger and hopelessness was about to open a new chapter, though neither of them yet understood how much their lives were about to change. The night was beginning to fall when Amina carefully placed the clean dish back on the kitchen shelf. She turned to thank the cook and maid again, her voice soft but filled with sincerity. She had eaten a plate of food, and though it was a small thing for the wealthy household, for her it meant survival, another day of strength. She thought she would quietly leave the mansion and continue her search for work the next morning. But before she could step outside, the maid stopped her. "Wait here," the maid said, almost nervously. "The master wants to see you." Amina froze. Her heart began to beat fast. She wondered if she had done something wrong. Did she sweep badly? Did she upset someone by entering the kitchen? She lowered her gaze and held her bag tightly in her hands. She had no strength for arguments, but she had also done nothing wrong. She whispered to herself, "Be calm, Amina. You only asked for food with honest work." A moment later, Mr. Cameron entered the room. His presence was commanding, his tall figure dressed neatly even after a long day. The staff bowed their heads slightly in respect, and the atmosphere changed as if everyone became more careful with their movements. But Amina, though nervous, did not bow or act falsely. She simply stood still, waiting for him to speak. He studied her quietly for a moment. The flicker of recognition he had felt earlier returned stronger now. Her eyes, though tired, carried a spark of courage. They were the same eyes he had seen many years ago in a small family shop, when he was still on his way to building his empire. He felt something stir inside him, something unfamiliar, an uncomfortable mix of guilt, memory, and curiosity. "What is your name?" he asked firmly. His voice was not harsh, but it carried weight. "Amina," she replied softly. And why did you come here? She took a deep breath before answering. I was hungry. I had no work today, and no food. I thought maybe if I cleaned your steps, you would allow me a plate. I do not want charity. I only wanted to work for what I eat. Her words were simple, but they touched the air with honesty. Mr. Cameron nodded slowly, his eyes never leaving hers. Do you usually go from house to house asking this? No, she answered, shaking her head. I try to find work. Sometimes people allow me to wash dishes in small hotels, sometimes I help at the market. But today I had nothing. I could not let myself beg on the street. So I came here. Her voice did not tremble. She did not speak like a helpless victim. She spoke like someone with dignity, someone who valued even the smallest chance. And that dignity, even in her weakness, shook Mr. Cameron. For a moment he said nothing, then turned to the maid. Give her another plate to take with her. The maid nodded quickly and hurried to prepare food. But Amina stepped forward and shook her head. No, sir. Please. I cannot take what I did not earn. I already cleaned the steps for one plate. If you wish to give more, then let me clean more. Her words surprised him. In a world where people often asked for more, here was someone refusing extra without work. He looked at her carefully, and then said, Very well. Tomorrow, come back in the morning. We will find some work for you. You can clean the garden or help in the kitchen. In return, you will eat here. Amina's eyes widened. She had expected rejection, perhaps even anger. Instead, she had been offered regular work, even if only for food. Gratitude filled her heart, and for the first time in days, a small smile appeared on her face. Thank you, sir, she whispered. I will come. That night, she walked back to the small room she rented at the edge of the city. It was nothing more than a broken shelter with a thin mat, but she lay down with a full stomach and a heart slightly lighter than before. She closed her eyes and thought of her father's words once again. Work with dignity, and life will open doors. Perhaps this was the first door opening. The next morning, Amina woke early, washed herself with the little water she had, and walked back to the mansion. She reached before the staff had fully started their chores. The maid gave her tools, and she began cleaning the garden path, trimming bushes, and carrying water for plants. Though the work was hard under the sun, she did it with care. Each movement showed respect for the chance she had been given. The staff, at first curious, soon began to admire her dedication. From his study window, Mr. Cameron watched again. He saw her bending, lifting, and wiping sweat with her sleeve, never complaining. She looked fragile, yet her spirit was strong. He remembered how his own journey had begun with struggle, hunger, and rejection. But unlike him, she had no one to support her now. A strange thought entered his mind: why did he feel connected to her fate? In the afternoon, as she rested for a short while, he called her into his office. She entered nervously, standing near the door, careful not to touch the expensive furniture. Sit, he said, pointing to a chair. She hesitated but finally obeyed. Tell me about your family, he asked. Her eyes clouded with sadness. My father had a small shop. He worked hard to provide for us. But one day, the land was sold to a big company. They closed all the shops, and we lost everything. My father fell ill, and he never recovered. She lowered her eyes, holding back tears. Since then, I have worked wherever I can. My mother passed earlier, and I have no siblings. It is only me now. Her words pierced him deeply. He knew very well which company had bought that land. It was his. His expansion had been celebrated in newspapers, praised by investors, but for families like hers, it had meant ruin. He clenched his fists under the table. She had no idea that the man sitting before her was the very one responsible. He almost wanted to confess, but something held him back. Instead, he asked, "Do you blame the company that did this?" Amina looked up at him. "What would be the use of blame? It will not bring my father back. I only wish they had thought of the families before closing everything. But life does not ask what we want. We must accept and move forward." Her strength in those words shocked him. Instead of hatred, she carried resilience. Instead of bitterness, she carried acceptance. It humbled him, a man who had always measured success in numbers and deals. When she left the room, he remained still for a long time. He thought of all the people who had been crushed under his rise. For the first time, he questioned if his empire had been built only on power, without compassion. And for the first time, he felt the weight of regret. As days turned into weeks, Amina returned daily to work at the mansion. She cleaned, cooked, and cared for the gardens. In return, she received meals and sometimes small pay when extra work was done. The staff grew fond of her. Her quiet kindness, her determination, and her gratitude left an impression on everyone. She became part of the mansion's rhythm. And every evening, Mr. Cameron found himself watching her not with judgment, but with curiosity and reflection. Each day, her presence pulled him closer to the truth he had long avoided: success without humanity was empty. He did not yet know what he would do about the guilt in his heart, but he knew one thing. The young woman who had once knocked on his gate for food was no ordinary stranger. She had unknowingly opened a door in his own soul, a door that had been locked for far too long. The weeks slipped by quietly, and Amina's presence in the mansion began to feel natural. She arrived early each morning, carrying the same small bag and wearing the same simple clothes, and began her work without being told. She cleaned the garden paths, polished the floors, and sometimes helped the cook prepare vegetables. The staff often remarked on her politeness. She never raised her voice, never complained, and always worked with patience. Even when her hands grew rough from scrubbing, she smiled softly and continued. One evening, after finishing her tasks, she sat on the back steps of the mansion, resting for a moment. The cook brought her a small plate of leftover bread and curry, and she accepted it with gratitude. As she ate quietly, she did not realize that Mr. Cameron was standing in the shadows, watching her again. He had been observing her for days, not just her work but her way of being. Something about her calm nature unsettled him. It reminded him of a life he had long left behind. His mind kept returning to the thought that she was connected to his past. The memory of that little shop, the friendly face offering him tea years ago, and the kindness of a shopkeeper's daughter would not leave him. The more he watched Amina, the more he felt certain she was the same girl, now grown but carrying the same gentle dignity. The realization struck him harder each day. One night, unable to keep his thoughts to himself, he asked his trusted driver, "Do you remember the families who lost their shops when we bought the Market Street?" The driver hesitated. "Yes, sir. Many families suffered. Some moved away, some tried new businesses. Why do you ask?" Mr. Cameron's face hardened. There was one shop, an old man with his daughter. They were always polite. I remember their faces. I think the girl now works here." The driver looked surprised but said nothing more. He knew better than to question his master's emotions, but he noticed the unusual tone in his voice. It was not the cold, commanding tone of a businessman. It was softer, heavier, as if carrying guilt. The next morning, Amina was cleaning the large dining hall when Mr. Cameron entered. She quickly stood aside, holding the cloth in her hands. He studied her closely, then asked, "Did your father ever run a shop near the old market?" Her hands froze for a moment, and she looked at him in surprise. "Yes," she whispered. "How do you know?" He swallowed hard, his heart beating faster. "What kind of shop was it?" A grocery shop, she said softly. It was small but honest. We sold rice, sugar, and tea. My father loved greeting customers himself. But one day the land was sold, and we were forced out. After that, everything changed. Her words confirmed his suspicion. He felt a sharp pain in his chest. There was no doubt now she was the same girl. Years ago, he had signed a deal that ended her father's business, never once thinking of the families behind those shops. And here she was, working in his house for food. A heavy silence filled the room. Amina looked down, sensing something unusual in his expression. She thought perhaps she had spoken too much. "I'm sorry, sir," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to bother you with my story. I should continue cleaning." But he raised his hand to stop her. "No. You don't need to apologize. I asked you." He turned away, hiding the storm of emotions in his face. Later that night, alone in his office, he sat with his head in his hands. For the first time in years, he felt ashamed of his success. The empire he had built, the wealth he enjoyed, had destroyed lives like Amina's. He had told himself it was only business, that sacrifices were necessary for growth. But now, seeing the result in the form of this young woman working for scraps of food, he could not escape the truth. He spent sleepless nights thinking about what to do. Part of him wanted to confess immediately, to tell her he was the man behind her suffering. But another part of him feared her reaction. Would she hate him? Would she walk away? And strangely, he did not want her to leave. Her presence had brought light into his empty mansion. Days passed, and his guilt only grew. One afternoon, he found her sweeping the entrance steps, the same place where he had first seen her. He approached slowly and said, "Do you ever think of starting your own shop again?" She paused, looking at him with a small, sad smile. "Sometimes. But dreams need money, and I have none. I am just trying to survive each day. A shop is too far away for me now." Her words cut him deeply. He had more money than he could ever spend, yet here was someone working for food because of his past choices. That evening, he called his lawyer and asked, "If I wanted to create a fund for families who lost businesses because of my company, how would I do it?" The lawyer was shocked but quickly explained the process. Mr. Cameron nodded. "Prepare everything. I want it done quietly." But helping her secretly was not enough. The more he watched her, the more he felt compelled to give her a real chance. Not charity, but an opportunity. He wanted to see her live with dignity again, not just as a worker in his house. The turning point came one rainy night. The city streets flooded, and Amina arrived at the mansion soaked to the skin, shivering from the cold. Yet she still began her chores without complaint. Seeing her in such a condition broke something inside him. He called her into the study and offered her a towel and warm tea. As she sipped the tea, he said firmly, "From tomorrow, you will not only clean here. I want you to come to my company. We will find you proper work." She almost dropped the cup in shock. "Your company? But I don't know anything about offices. I only know how to clean and cook." He shook his head. "No. You have honesty, discipline, and strength. These are more valuable than skills. Skills can be taught. Character cannot. You will learn." Her eyes filled with tears. No one had ever spoken to her like this before. She wanted to believe him, but she was afraid. "Why would you do this for me, sir? I am no one." For a long moment, he was silent. Then he said softly, "Because sometimes life gives us a chance to correct our mistakes." She did not fully understand his words, but she felt the sincerity in them. That night, she went home with her heart trembling not from hunger or fear, but from the possibility of hope. For the first time since her father's shop had closed, she saw a small light of a new beginning. And for Mr. Cameron, the decision was not only about helping her. It was about facing his past, about beginning the journey of redemption. He did not yet know how she would react when she learned the full truth, but he knew one thing. He could no longer stand aside and watch her suffer. The girl who once knocked on his gate for a plate of food had unknowingly unlocked the frozen part of his soul. And now, everything in his life was about to change. The next morning, Amina walked toward the mansion with mixed feelings in her heart. She remembered Mr. Cameron's words from the rainy night, "From tomorrow, you will not only clean here. I want you to come to my company." His voice had been firm, and his eyes had shown sincerity, but she still wondered if he truly meant it. Perhaps he had spoken in the moment, moved by pity. Perhaps by morning he would forget. She told herself not to hope too much, because hopes often hurt more than hunger. When she entered the mansion, the maid smiled at her kindly. "The master wants to see you in the study." Amina's hands tightened on her bag. She slowly walked down the hallway, her footsteps echoing on the marble floor. Inside the study, Mr. Cameron was already waiting. Papers were neatly stacked on his desk, and a cup of coffee rested beside him. He looked up and said, "Sit down." She obeyed quietly, though she still felt uneasy in such a grand room. He studied her for a moment before speaking. "I gave you my word yesterday, and I do not take my words lightly. From today, you will begin training at my company." Her eyes widened. "But, sir, I have no education beyond a few school years. I have never worked in an office. I don't even know how to use a computer." He leaned back in his chair, his expression calm but serious. "That does not matter. You are hard-working, disciplined, and honest. These are things no school can teach. The rest you can learn. I will assign someone to guide you." Amina was silent for a long moment. The thought of stepping into a company building full of professionals in suits terrified her. Yet, there was something in his voice that pushed her to trust. She lowered her eyes and whispered, "If you believe I can, then I will try." Mr. Cameron nodded. "Good. You will not be a servant in my mansion anymore. You will work with dignity." His words carried weight, and though she did not fully understand why, they made her heart tremble. Later that day, he arranged a driver to take her to the company's headquarters. As the car rolled through the busy streets, Amina looked out the window in wonder. The tall glass building came into view, its shining windows reflecting the sky. She had passed by such places before, always from a distance, never imagining she could step inside. When she entered the lobby, her steps were slow and careful. Employees in neat clothes hurried past, carrying files and talking on phones. Some glanced at her curiously, for her simple dress and shy manner stood out. But Mr. Cameron himself guided her toward the training department, ignoring the looks of others. "This is Miss Amina," he introduced to the head trainer. "She will be joining us. Teach her from the basics." The trainer, surprised but respectful, nodded. "Of course, sir." That afternoon, Amina sat in a small training room, learning how to type letters on a keyboard. At first her fingers were stiff, pressing the wrong keys, but she did not give up. Her determination made the trainer pause more than once. He had taught many young graduates who grew frustrated quickly, but this woman, who had come from nothing, carried patience like a shield. Meanwhile, in his office, Mr. Cameron tried to focus on his work but found his mind drifting. He thought of Amina's story, of her father's lost shop, and of the choices he had made years ago. He knew one day she would discover the truth. He dreaded that moment, yet he also felt a strange relief that he was finally doing something to repair what was broken. As days turned into weeks, Amina learned more. She discovered how to file documents, how to answer calls politely, and how to assist with small office tasks. She made mistakes often, but each time she corrected them with humility. Slowly, the staff who had first doubted her began to admire her effort. She greeted everyone with respect, never boasting, never demanding, only eager to improve. One afternoon, while she was arranging papers, two young employees whispered near her. "Do you know who she is?" one asked. "The boss brought her himself. She doesn't even have qualifications." "Maybe she's just lucky," the other said. "Still, look how hard she works. I couldn't sit typing for hours like that without losing my mind." Their words reached Amina's ears, but instead of feeling insulted, she smiled faintly. She knew people would doubt her. She did not expect easy acceptance. All she wanted was to prove, little by little, that she deserved the chance given to her. At the mansion, too, things changed. She no longer swept the floors or washed dishes. Instead, she returned home after work like the other employees. The staff missed her gentle presence in the house but were happy for her. "You deserve this, Amina," the maid told her one evening. "I have never seen the master treat anyone like this before. He must see something special in you." Amina blushed and shook her head. "He is just kind." But deep inside, she wondered why he had chosen her. Out of all the people he could help, why her? Mr. Cameron, on the other hand, knew the answer. Each day as he watched her grow, his respect for her deepened. She was not just a reminder of his past mistake, she was also a mirror showing him what real strength looked like. She had lost everything and yet carried herself with dignity. In her presence, he began to feel ashamed of his arrogance, of the pride that had once blinded him. One evening, after the office had emptied, he called her into his cabin. She entered carefully, holding a notebook. "Yes, sir." He looked at her for a long moment, then said, "Do you ever think about what you want for your future?" She hesitated, then answered honestly. "Sometimes. I dream of opening a small shop again, like my father had. But dreams are expensive. For now, I only want to be useful here." Her words struck him deeply. He thought of the fortune he had, the power in his hands, and the girl before him who still dreamed of something so simple. He clenched his jaw, struggling with the truth burning inside him. He wanted to tell her, "I am the reason you lost that shop. I am the reason your father's health broke." But fear silenced him. Instead, he said, "Perhaps one day that dream will not be so far." Her face lit with a small, grateful smile, and she bowed her head. "If God wills, sir." That night, alone in his mansion, Mr. Cameron stood by the window looking out at the city lights. He thought of the man he had been: cold, ambitious, careless of others. And he thought of the man he wanted to be now: someone who repaired what he had destroyed. Amina had unknowingly become the reason for his change. The choice before him was clear: he could continue living with his secret, helping her quietly while hiding his guilt, or he could face the truth and risk losing her trust. It was not an easy choice, but deep inside, he knew the right path. For Amina, life was slowly transforming. Each morning she woke with purpose, each evening she returned home with dignity. She no longer counted days by hunger but by learning. Yet, she still wondered why the powerful CEO treated her with such unusual care. She did not know that behind his silence lay a heavy secret, a secret that would soon test both her strength and his courage. Months had passed, and Amina's life had changed in ways she had never imagined. She now worked as an assistant in Mr. Cameron's company, learning new tasks every week. Her handwriting became neater from taking notes, her typing faster, and her confidence stronger. Though she still dressed simply, she carried herself with dignity. People in the office began to respect her, not because of her background, but because of her effort and patience. She had earned her place little by little, with honesty and hard work. Yet, beneath her steady growth, one question often rested in her mind. Why had Mr. Cameron chosen her? He could have ignored her at his gate that first day. He could have given her one meal and sent her away. But instead, he had opened the doors of his home and his company. Each time she tried to understand, she found no answer. Still, she remained grateful and worked even harder, as if to prove she was worthy of the chance. For Mr. Cameron, however, the weight of truth grew heavier with each day. Every time he looked at Amina, he saw not only the hard-working young woman she had become but also the shadow of her father's shop. The memory of signing that contract, the papers that had shut down dozens of small businesses, returned to him at night like an old wound. He told himself he was helping her now, giving her dignity and opportunity, but his heart whispered that it was not enough. He had to tell her the truth. One evening, after the office had closed, he asked her to meet him in the study of his mansion. She came with her notebook, thinking it was another task. But when she entered, she saw him sitting quietly, his face more serious than usual. "Sit down, Amina," he said gently. She obeyed, placing the notebook on her lap. She waited for instructions, but he did not speak immediately. Instead, he looked at her for a long time, as though gathering courage. Finally, he took a deep breath. "There is something I must tell you. Something I should have told you long ago." Her heart quickened. She had never seen him this uneasy. She remained silent, her eyes fixed on him. He continued, his voice low. "You once told me your father had a shop in the old market. Do you know which company bought that land?" She frowned slightly. "I only know it was a big company. We never knew the name of the man behind it." "Why do you ask, sir?" His eyes darkened. "Because that man was me. It was my company. I signed the deal that ended your father's shop." The words hung in the air like heavy stones. Amina's body stiffened. For a moment she could not breathe. She stared at him in shock, her lips parting but no words coming out. "I did not know you then," he said quickly, his voice full of regret. "I did not think of the families. I only thought of business, of growth. I told myself it was progress. But I was blind. I destroyed lives without realizing it. When I saw you at my gate that day, I recognized you. And I have carried the weight of that guilt ever since." Amina's eyes filled with tears. She gripped her notebook tightly, her chest rising and falling fast. The man who had given her hope was also the man who had taken everything from her family. Her mind swirled with confusion. Why didn't you tell me before?" she whispered, her voice shaking. "Because I was afraid," he admitted. "Afraid that you would hate me, that you would walk away. But I could not carry the silence any longer. You deserve the truth. Whatever anger you feel, whatever pain, let it be on me. I will accept it." Silence filled the room. Amina's tears slid down her cheeks as she looked at the man before her. She remembered her father's shop, the shelves filled with rice and tea, the customers who greeted them warmly. She remembered the day everything ended, the sorrow in her father's eyes. And now she knew who had caused it. For a long while, she said nothing. Mr. Cameron sat still, waiting, his hands clenched on the desk. He expected her to cry out in anger, to curse him, perhaps even to leave. But when she finally spoke, her words were quiet and steady. "You took everything from us. My father never recovered. He worked hard all his life, and in the end, he lost his dream. I lost my childhood. I lost my family. Nothing can change that." Her voice trembled, but she continued. "And yet, if I hold anger forever, it will only break me further. My father used to say, bitterness destroys the heart faster than hunger. I cannot bring him back, but I can choose what kind of life I want to live." Her words stunned him. He had prepared himself for hatred, but instead she gave him forgiveness not out of weakness, but out of strength. Her eyes shone with pain, Yes, but also with courage. I forgive you, she said softly. Not because what you did was small, but because carrying hate will not heal me. I choose to move forward. Tears burned in Mr. Cameron's eyes, though he quickly wiped them away. In that moment, he felt smaller than ever, humbled by the dignity of the young woman he had once ruined. I cannot erase the past, he said firmly, but I can build a better future for you. I want to support your dream of having a shop again. Not as charity, but as your right. You deserve it. Amina shook her head quickly. No, sir. I do not want gifts. If I open a shop, it must be from my own effort. You have given me enough by allowing me to work with dignity. That is all I need. But he looked at her with determination. This is not charity. This is justice. I owe it to your father, and I owe it to you. If you wish, I will be only a silent partner. The shop will be yours to run. But I will not rest until I repair what I destroyed. After a long pause, she nodded slowly, her eyes still wet. If it is truly justice, then I accept. Weeks later, a small grocery shop opened on a quiet street. The shelves were filled with rice, sugar, and tea, just as her father's had once been. Amina stood behind the counter, her head held high, greeting customers with a smile. To her, this was not only a shop, it was her father's dream reborn, her dignity restored. Mr. Cameron visited quietly one evening. He watched from outside as she served customers with patience and warmth. He did not enter, for this was her world now, not his. But as he stood there, he felt a peace he had not known in years. In the office, too, his policies began to change. He ordered his managers to protect small businesses, to offer partnerships instead of destruction. The cold businessman was no more, in his place stood a man who had learned that success without humanity was failure. For Amina, life was not suddenly easy. She still worked hard each day, balancing her shop with part-time work at the company. But she no longer lived with the weight of loss. She carried forgiveness in her heart, strength in her spirit, and hope in her steps. And for Mr. Cameron, every time he saw her, he remembered the day she had stood at his gate, asking only for a plate of food. That moment had changed everything. It had shown him that true power was not in wealth but in compassion, and true dignity was not in riches but in resilience. Their paths, once broken by cruelty, had crossed again to create something new, redemption for him, and a new beginning for her.